In today's Chinese marriage law, it is stipulated that a man who is eligible for marriage can only marry one wife. However, if we trace back to ancient China, a man who has married a wife can also take another concubine. As long as he has sufficient strength and status, he can marry multiple concubines. However, the concubines here have significant differences in their titles and status compared to their regular wives. In addition to the royal family, the aristocratic class and some wealthy commoners also generally adopt concubines. Polygamy has become the mainstream form of traditional Chinese marriage system and has lasted for thousands of years. In China's feudal era, concubinage and marriage were parallel relationships, and concubines were regarded as men's sexual partners. As long as financial resources allowed, they could have multiple concubines. Moreover, ancient Chinese law also supported a man's right to keep concubines. It would be illegal for a wife to interfere with her husband's concubinage. Even if a princess gets married, she has no right to interfere with her husband's right to take concubines. As far as the relationship with the husband is concerned, although the wife and the concubine both have sexual relations with the husband, the nature is completely different. A wife is the woman of an openly married man. In name, a concubine is just a property purchased by the husband with money, and the adoption ceremony is much simpler. Moreover, the legal wife has a legally protected status, but concubines are like commodities and can be bought and sold freely. Starting from the Eastern Han Dynasty in China, the number of concubines a man can marry was regulated by law, and regulate according to his level and social status. In any dynasty in ancient China, a concubine could not be considered as the master of a family. Whether it was the male lead or the legitimate wife, a concubine was just a property, only able to walk and speak, somewhat like a slave. Therefore, a concubine does not have freedom and human rights. Although she has given birth to a child, she cannot be recognized as the biological mother herself, but must be recognized as the mother of the male lead's legitimate wife. There are three main ways to take concubines. The first is through human trafficking. Due to financial constraints, poor families sell their daughters or use other illegal means. The second is elopement, that is, lovers who get together in private without going through a formal marriage ceremony. The third is robbery, usually through war or when the family is implicated in political changes. However, ancient China had strict regulations on the number of concubines, and each dynasty had different restrictions. In the Tang dynasty, princes could only marry 12 concubines, while ordinary officials had different restrictions based on their rank. For example, second-grade officials are limited to 8 concubines, third-grade officials are limited to 6 concubines, and fourth-grade officials are limited to 4 concubines. Starting from the Yuan dynasty, the law stipulated that ordinary people were not allowed to take concubines. But by the Ming dynasty, the law clearly stipulated that any man over 40 years old and without sons could take a concubine. Because according to Chinese filial piety regulations, carrying on the family line is the greatest filial piety. This also provides a grand reason for ancient Chinese men to keep concubines. Of course, these requirements and norms are aimed at ordinary people and officials. If the focus is extended to the ancient Chinese royal family, the selection and supervision of women here will be even more cumbersome and shocking. The Chinese emperor had his own harem, which was the palace where his concubines lived. Before these women could become the emperor's concubines, they had to go through a rigorous selection process. They first started screening from all over the country, and then underwent physical examinations for skin infections, body hair, body odor, etc. Through this process, people will learn etiquette, speaking skills, walking standards, and even how to behave. You also need to have some talents such as painting, poetry, dance, etc. After passing all tests, they are also closely monitored to ensure they don't have any bad habits while sleeping, such as snoring or talking in their sleep. These selected concubines are different from ordinary women. They are a group of people in the palace who can live and have close relationships with the emperor. They enjoy the wealth and luxurious life that ordinary people envy. After becoming the imperial concubines, they were all placed under the jurisdiction of the empress, as she was the mistress of the harem. There can only be one empress, while there can be hundreds or thousands of concubines. These concubines are divided into different levels based on virtue, behavior, appearance, and other standards, and each level enjoys different treatment and status. After these concubines entered the palace, they did not need to engage in any special work. They mainly studied makeup every day, followed the queen to greet the emperor's mother, learn talent, skincare, and so on. Their appearance will have a profound impact on their fate. In order to maintain this beauty, the concubines need to strictly follow health preservation methods, including using pearl powder, bird's nest, essential oils, herbs, petals, etc. to take care of their skin, in order to win the favor of the emperor. After Emperor Qin Shi Huang unified China, he selected thousands of women from the destroyed countries to live in his own harem. The number of concubines in the imperial harem varies in different dynasties, but some extreme emperors have women in the harem even exceeding 10,000. For example, during the Tang dynasty, Emperor Li Longji had more than 10,000 women from the imperial palace to various palaces. This is a very large number, so many women are occupied by the emperor, but the emperor only has one. His energy is actually limited, and it is impossible to meet every concubine. This is a joyful and painful thing. In fact, many concubines never have the chance to see the emperor in their lifetime, and many of them may just be virgins, living their entire lives in obscurity. Once favored by the emperor, especially after pregnancy, the status of the consort will also rise sharply. If the child born is a boy, they will enjoy higher treatment and status. Because giving birth to a son is the pinnacle of the imperial concubines and a direct way to improve their status and safety in the palace, the birth of a male heir not only enhances the status of the concubines in the hierarchical system, but also serves as a protective umbrella for their future, as their child has a high probability of becoming a prince in the future. But the emperor's harem is not as harmonious and beautiful as it seems. Behind it is a place full of deception and traps. If women's struggles are not handled well, even if the concubines have given birth to sons, they are likely to lose their lives inadvertently. For example, Wu Zetian, China's only female emperor, gradually climbed to the pinnacle of power through many cruel means, and in the process, countless concubines were persecuted and killed. When Wu Zetian was still a concubine, she was deeply favored by the emperor because of her beauty and high emotional intelligence. She conspired to get the emperor to depose her queen, and later persecuted and killed other concubines favored by the emperor, and even the children were involved. In order to reach the top of power, Wu Zetian even killed her own children. This was her political strategy. Even innocent people can easily be drawn into the fray and become innocent victims. Because the survival rules of the harem often only allow a few people to be favored, she must remove obstacles for her own progress, which also highlights the cruelty and darkness of the harem system. In ancient times, the number of concubines in the imperial harem often reached several thousand, but the number of truly favored concubines did not exceed 1%. Most of the concubines, as they grew older and became less beautiful than they were when they were young, were left with only darkness in their lives. Especially among these concubines, there are some who have been sent to the occult palace due to mistakes or persecution, which is the place where the concubine lives after losing favor. After the emperor's death, the fate of these concubines was in the hands of others. There is only misery waiting for them, and a few concubines will have a better way out. Most concubines only have 5 endings. The first is to be buried with the emperor and buried in the imperial mausoleum. The second is to be imprisoned in the cold palace until death. The third is to live with the concubine who has a son. The fourth is to become a monk. The fifth is to be expelled from the palace, but this situation is relatively rare. Most of their fates will disappear into the dust of history with the death of the emperor.